One of the most important nutrients, even for a soybean crop, is nitrogen, but you may not have to fertilize at all with nitrogen. The plant can naturally get it through the process of soybean nodulation, but how can you get more nodulation and in effect get more nitrogen into the plant? That's what we want to talk about today.
Soybeans are a legume crop, and let's face it, Brian, they're taken for granted. It's, oh, I don't have to put any nitrogen out there. I've got nodules that are going to take care of that. But you know, that may be true when you have 20 bushel beans, but when you're going for 100, there's no way they're going to produce enough nitrogen for 100 bushels of soybeans, so we have to help that plant out. The cheapest way to get the nitrogen into the crop, and one of the most effective ways, is to improve nodulation in the soybeans.
Well, one way that you can get more nodulation is by adding more bacteria to the soil through the process of inoculation. All soybean inoculant is live bacteria, it's live rhizobia bacteria, and in many cases it's certain strains of bacteria that are very efficient at producing nitrogen, or in effect pulling nitrogen out of the air and converting it into a form that the plant can use. So we really encourage you in all cases, and I don't care even if you're raising continuous soybeans, inoculate your soybeans.
Well, there's two things here that I see that could go wrong, and there's lots of things that could go wrong, but let's just say you did everything right, handling inoculant and getting it applied. Once it gets into your soil, if you've got a wacky soil pH, you're not going to have very good survival of those bacteria. So that could be a big problem for you and lead to poor nodulation. The other thing is if you have a heavy amount of nitrate left over from the season before. Now we saw that on some farms in 2017 where guys had a lot of mineralization out in the field and not tremendous yields. Well, they had all kinds of nitrate left. Well, if there's plenty of free nitrate in the soil, how much work does the soybean plant have to do to provide food for bacteria when it can just have that nitrate for free? Well, it's not going to do it. It's just going to take the free nitrate. So there's always this talk about, hey, if you apply a bunch of N, you're going to hurt your nodulation. I would say it might delay the nodulation. It's not going to completely eliminate it, but it certainly will delay it for some time.
All right, so I'm glad Darren brought that up because that's where I'm going to disagree to a point. What we find is if you're putting 50 pounds, 100 pounds of nitrogen on there, that's no big deal. Don't forget that if you're trying to raise 60, 70, 80 bushel beans, you're going to need 300-400 pounds of nitrogen. Is 50 or 100 any big deal? No way. You're still going to have great nodulation most likely if you've done everything else right. So don't even worry about that so much. What we do want to get concerned about, again, is coming back to this process of how do we get the best nodulation. Now, Darren touched on the soil pH, but let's talk about the specific pH that we want. We'd really like to see that pH in the 6.3 to 6.8 range. That's where we find the best overall nodulation. It's basically the environment that the bacteria love the most.
The other thing is that bacteria need to have oxygen. They need oxygen to survive, and if we've got soil compaction or if we've got very poorly drained soils, what we find is those bacteria will die, and you won't get them back later in the season. They're just gone.
And it's not just short term, do we have enough oxygen? It's year round. So in other words, if you say, well, during the crop season I was fine. Yeah, my water table came up over the winter time. No big deal. Yeah, it is a big deal because the bacteria still need to survive over the winter time. If you have a high water table, now a lot of those bacteria are dead and you're not going to have great nodulation going into the next year.
The other thing is the nutrient balance in your soil. You've got to have a good balance of nutrients out there of everything, but then there's some specific ones that play into nodulation. One of them that doesn't get talked about enough is molybdenum. And it's funny, we did some tests on our farm just to see what's our molybdenum level, because on normal soil tests, well, it doesn't even have molybdenum on there. They don't even check for it. You have to spend really quite a bit more money to get a specific molybdenum test from most labs. Well, when we tested for molybdenum, we had some fields where it was non-detectable. Well, if we're non-detectable, and this is an important nutrient for nodulation, I think this is one that we need to get more of out in our field, and you may as well. I would start by measuring in your fields just to see where your levels are, and then going from there, because there's a lot of different ways to get molybdenum out in your fields.
Well, in addition to maybe pulling a few soil tests for molybdenum, really look at plant tissue analysis. You can test the soybean as you go through the season and see if there is some molybdenum getting into that plant. All right, Darren mentioned this nutrient balance and stuff in the soil. Here's a lot of what it really amounts to. Okay, you got to think about why are these bacteria colonizing on the root and why are they bringing nitrogen into the plant? Well, the reason why is because the plant is providing sugar for the bacteria. It's providing food for the bacteria. So just think about it logically. If I have a super healthy soybean plant, is it probably able to produce more sugar? You bet it is. So you really want to look at your NP and K. You want to look at your secondary nutrients. You want to look at your micronutrients. Again, you got to take care of your drainage and your pH. Do all those things right. Control the weeds, the insects, diseases, everything. And you will find you're going to have better nodulation simply because your plant fed more bacteria.
One other topic that we hear from time to time when we think about nodulation is Roundup. And oh boy, everybody wants to blame everything on Roundup, but it is a fact that in a plant, when you spray Roundup on a Roundup ready plant, it compartmentalizes that Roundup. It doesn't metabolize it, it just pushes it down into the root system to kind of get it out of the way so the plant can keep growing. Well, what's down in the root system? Nodules. They're actually inside the root, right? So when you've got nodules down there and you're shoving Roundup down by those nodules, there's a lot of speculation that, well, the bacteria don't like it and they leave, or maybe it's toxic to the bacteria and they die. I don't know what the real story is. Brian, what's your feeling on this?
Well, all I know is I'm not that worried about it. We've never found anything on any wide scale that using Roundup, Roundup beans, anything like that have fewer nodules, lower yield, those types of things. So could there be something there? Yes, it's possible. Could it be that, well, maybe if I delayed my Roundup, I might have 0.1 bushels more? It's possible.
Well, that's been the
I just don't think it's any real big deal.
That's been the observation, is delaying the Roundup application, just let the plant build up more nodules and it was more able to tolerate that. I don't know, like you say, I don't know if it's a huge deal or not.
I think these other factors are way more important.
Totally agree, and we've got control of all of them. So when you're thinking about nodulation in your field, it is so critically important in a legume crop like soybeans. We talked about a number of factors today to make sure that you have good nodulation so you produce plenty of nitrogen so you can achieve high yields. Well, if you're shooting for high yields, you need to have great weed control too. We'll show you how to stop our weed of the week coming up next.